My name is Renee, and at 26, I discovered a mass in my abdomen that my family spent 11 months pretending didn't exist. They told me I was being dramatic, that I ate too much junk food, that I needed yoga instead of a doctor. My mother went so far as to cancel an ultrasound behind my back. My father told the ER nurse I had a history of panic attacks. And when I finally collapsed in a restaurant kitchen with a 103-degree fever, they still showed up only to manage the optics. What kind of parents choose their reputation over their daughter's life? And what happens when the daughter stops asking for permission and starts demanding answers? It started on a Tuesday in late March. I remember because the dogwoods outside my apartment window had just begun to bloom, white petals pressing against the glass like small, pale hands. I was getting dressed for my shift at the restaurant. I waited tables 6 nights a week at a seafood place on King Street in Charleston when I felt it. A heaviness low in my belly. Not sharp, not stabbing, just a dull, stubborn pressure, like something had settled in a place it didn't belong. I pressed my fingers against the spot, just below my navel and slightly to the left. There was something there, not soft like bloating, firmer, rounder, like a stone sitting beneath skin. I held my breath and pressed again, and the pressure pushed back. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe a pulled muscle from carrying trays. Maybe something digestive. I tied my apron, pulled my hair into a knot, and drove to work. The radio played something forgettable. The March air smelled like salt and magnolia. I didn't think about it again until 3 a.m, when I woke up with a cramp so deep it curled me into a ball on the mattress. By the end of that week, the pressure hadn't gone away. It sat there like a passenger I hadn't invited, quiet during the day, louder at night. I started sleeping on my right side because lying flat made it worse. I stopped eating full meals, not on purpose, but because my stomach felt permanently occupied. My jeans buttoned tighter on the left side than the right, which made no sense until I stood in front of the bathroom mirror and saw it. A slight asymmetry, barely visible unless you were looking, but undeniable once you did. I called my mother on a Sunday morning. She picked up on the 4th ring, her voice wrapped in that particular blend of distraction and impatience she wore like a cardigan. "Mom, I found something. A lump. In my stomach." A pause. Then, "A lump? Renee, you probably just need to eat more fiber. It's not digestion. I can feel it." She sighed. Not a worried sigh. The kind of sigh that says you're inconveniencing me with your body again. "You've always had a sensitive stomach. Remember when you were 15 and convinced yourself you had appendicitis? That was 10 years ago, and it turned out to be gas." I heard my father's voice in the background, muffled, but familiar. "Tell her to take a Tums and stop Googling." My mother relayed the message as if it were medical advice. I let the conversation die, hung up, sat on the edge of my bed, and pressed my palm flat against the mass. Still there, still growing, still mine to deal with, apparently, alone. 2 weeks passed. The cramps became more frequent. Not daily, but close rolling waves of pressure that left me gripping the edge of the hostess stand or leaning against the walk-in cooler at work, waiting for the pain to pass before I could smile at another table. My manager, Deb, noticed first. "You look like you're carrying a secret," she said one night, catching me mid-wince behind the bar. "You okay?" "Just cramps," I told her. "Bad cycle." She didn't push, but her eyes lingered. I made an appointment at the community health clinic on Rivers Avenue, the kind of place where the magazines in the waiting room are 3 years old and the receptionist calls you baby regardless of your age. I paid the $40 sliding scale fee and sat on a paper-covered table while a physician's assistant named Gail pressed gently along my abdomen. Her fingers stopped where mine always did. "How long has this been here?" "About 3 weeks. Maybe a month." She didn't say anything alarming. She didn't need to. Her face did the talking, a slight tightening around her eyes, a controlled exhale through her nose. She wrote a referral for an ultrasound and handed it to me like it mattered. "Don't wait on this," she said. I called the imaging center the next day and scheduled the appointment for the following Thursday. Then I made the mistake of telling my parents. I drove out to Mount Pleasant that Sunday for my father's birthday dinner. The house smelled like roast chicken and lemon. My younger brother Derek was already there, stretched across the couch with his phone. My mother moved through the kitchen with her usual choreographed efficiency, Every garnish placed, every napkin folded, every surface wiped twice. During dessert, between bites of pound cake, I mentioned the clinic visit. I kept it casual, light. I said I had a follow-up ultrasound scheduled, just to check on something. My father set his fork down. An ultrasound for what? A lump. The PA said it should be looked at. My mother's jaw tightened. Renee, we talked about this. You told me to eat fiber. That's not talking about it. I told you not to spiral. Her voice dropped, the way it always did when she wanted to sound reasonable while being anything but. These clinics hand out referrals like candy. They make money off your fear. It's a sliding scale clinic. They're not making money off anything. My father leaned back. How much is this ultrasound going to cost? I'm on your insurance. It should be covered. The silence that followed had weight. My mother looked at my father. He looked at his plate. Something unspoken passed between them, a negotiation I wasn't invited to witness. We'll see, he said. I drove home with the referral slip folded in my jacket pocket, and a feeling in my chest that had nothing to do with the mass in my abdomen. It was the old familiar ache of being translated before I'd finished speaking, of having my sentences rewritten by people who were supposed to read them first. The following Wednesday, one day before my ultrasound, I got a call from the imaging center. Hi, Miss Caldwell? We're calling to confirm that your appointment for tomorrow has been canceled. My stomach dropped. I didn't cancel it. It was canceled by the policyholder on your insurance plan. I sat on the floor of my apartment hallway, phone pressed to my ear, and asked her to repeat that. She did. Same words, same polite tone, same impossible sentence. My mother had called the insurance company and canceled the authorization. I didn't call her. I didn't call my father. I sat there for a long time, watching the light shift on the wall as the afternoon tilted toward evening, feeling the mass pulse below my navel like a second heartbeat, and I understood something I'd been circling for years. They weren't worried about my health. They were worried about what my health might cost them, not just financially, but socially. A sick daughter meant questions. Questions meant attention. Attention meant cracks in the image they'd spent decades shellacking into place. That night, I opened a composition notebook I'd bought at the dollar store and wrote the date at the top of the first page. Below it, I described the mass. Its size, its texture, how it felt when I pressed. I wrote down the PA's exact words. I wrote down the cancellation. I wrote down my mother's tone at dinner, not what she said, but how she said it, the architecture of dismissal I'd grown up inside. I wrote it all down because I realized that if no one else was going to take me seriously, I needed a record that took me seriously on my behalf. Over the following weeks, the symptoms escalated. The cramps came daily now. I started waking up drenched in sweat at 2, 3 in the morning, sheets twisted around my legs like restraints. I lost 8 pounds without trying. My periods became unpredictable, sometimes arriving twice a month, sometimes vanishing for 6 weeks. I bled through my work pants on a Friday night and had to tie a black apron around my waist to finish the shift. I kept telling my parents, not because I expected them to listen, but because I wanted to document the asking. Mom, I'm bleeding more than usual. You've always had heavy periods. That's just how the women in this family are built. Dad, I'm losing weight, and I'm not dieting. You look fine. Better than fine. You could stand to lose a few anyway. The cruelty wasn't loud. It was ambient. It lived in the pauses, in the subject changes, in the way they could acknowledge my body when it suited them and ignore it when it didn't. I recorded dates in the notebook. I saved text messages. I screenshotted the insurance portal showing the canceled authorization. I didn't know what I was building. I just knew I was building something. In May, my mother hosted a garden party for her church group. White tablecloths, sweet tea in mason jars, camellia centerpieces. I was expected to attend, not invited expected. I arrived in a loose sundress, the only thing that didn't press against the mass. By then, I'd stopped wearing anything fitted. The asymmetry in my lower abdomen was visible if you knew where to look, though I'd become an expert at angles and layers, and standing with my left hip tilted away from the light. My Aunt Patricia noticed first. She hugged me and pulled back with a squint. "Honey, are you?" She didn't finish. My mother's hand appeared on her shoulder like a claw. "She's been stress eating. The restaurant keeps her up late. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. Not because I didn't have words, because I'd trained myself to wait, to calculate the cost of speaking before I spent it. And in that garden, surrounded by women who'd known me since I was a baby, the cost felt too high. Later, in the kitchen, as I refilled a pitcher of lemonade, my mother cornered me beside the refrigerator. If you mention anything about a lump, a doctor, or an ultrasound today, you will not be welcome back in this house. Her voice was barely above a whisper. Her smile hadn't dropped. I'm sick, Mom. You're anxious. There's a difference. A doctor told me. A physician's assistant at a strip mall clinic told you to get a test. That's not a diagnosis, that's a sales pitch. She picked up the pitcher and walked back to the garden without looking at me. I stood there, hands wet, watching condensation drip down the side of the counter, and for the first time, I felt something beyond frustration. I felt afraid, not of the lump, of what would happen to me if I kept letting them define what was real. June was the turning point, though it didn't announce itself as one. I was carrying a tray of oysters to table 14 when the pain hit sudden, searing, like a fist clenching deep inside my pelvis. The tray tipped. Shells and mignonette and crushed ice scattered across the hardwood. I caught the edge of the table, but my knees buckled and I went down. Deb was beside me in seconds. Renee, look at me. I couldn't speak. The pain was a wall, solid, white, total. My vision tunneled. I heard someone say, "Call 911," and felt hands under my arms, lifting me, guiding me toward the back office, and then the world tilted sideways and went dark. I woke up in the ambulance. Fluorescent light, the smell of latex, a paramedic asking me to rate my pain on a scale of 1 to 10. I said 8. It was a 12. At the ER, they started an IV and drew blood. A nurse took my vitals and frowned at the thermometer. 103.2. She pressed along my abdomen, and I saw her face change the same tightening I'd seen on Gail's face months ago, except faster, more alarmed. How long have you had this mass? Since March. Have you had any imaging? It was scheduled. Someone canceled it. She didn't ask who. She just typed. My parents arrived 45 minutes later. My mother came in first, purse clutched like a shield. My father followed, phone in hand, mid-sentence about something at his office. What happened? My mother asked. But not the way a mother asks. The way a public relations manager asks. What's the damage? I collapsed at work. You fainted. I collapsed. There's a mass in my abdomen, and I have 103 fever. She turned to the nurse. She has severe anxiety. It presents physically sometimes. She's been through this before. The nurse looked at me, then back at my mother. Ma'am, her blood work shows elevated white cell count and inflammatory markers. We need to do imaging. She doesn't need imaging. She needs rest. I found my voice. It came out hoarse but steady. I'm 26 years old. I'm the patient. I'm authorizing the imaging. My mother blinked. My father looked up from his phone. The nurse nodded once and left the room to put in the order. My mother stepped closer to the bed. Her voice dropped to that dangerous whisper. You're going to bankrupt this family with your theatrics. Then take me off your insurance, I said. I'll pay for it myself. She didn't answer. She sat down in the visitor chair and stared at the wall, arms folded, jaw locked. My father excused himself to take a call. Neither of them asked if I was in pain. The CT scan happened at 11 that night. I lay still in the machine, listening to its mechanical hum, feeling the contrast dye warm my veins like liquid courage. 15 minutes of stillness, while the machine mapped what my family had refused to acknowledge. Dr. Ades Okafor arrived at my room just after midnight. She was calm, deliberate, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, and a voice that carried the particular weight of someone who had learned to deliver hard truths gently. She pulled up the scan on a monitor and angled it toward me. This is your pelvis, she said, pointing. And this shadow here, is a mass on your left ovary. It's roughly the size of a grapefruit. I stared at it. Even on the grainy screen, it was undeniable. A dark, dense shape sitting where it shouldn't be, pressing against structures that had names I didn't know yet but would soon learn. It's been growing for months, she continued. Based on the size and the blood work, we need to determine whether it's benign or malignant. I'm recommending a biopsy and a consultation with gynecologic oncology. I looked at her. My eyes burned, but I didn't cry. Is it cancer? We don't know yet, but we need to find out quickly. The fact that it's been left this long concerns me. It wasn't my choice to leave it. She paused. Her gaze held mine for a moment, and something passed between us. Not pity, recognition. I understand. And from this point forward, every decision about your care goes through you and only you. That sentence broke something open in my chest. Not sadness. Relief. The kind that comes when you've been holding your breath so long you've forgotten you were doing it. The biopsy was scheduled for 2 days later. In the interim, I did 3 things. First, I called Deb and told her I'd be out for a while. She didn't ask questions. She just said, "Your job's here when you're ready." Second, I opened the composition notebook and wrote down every word Dr. Okafor had said, every measurement, every term. Third, I blocked my mother's number. The biopsy results came back on a Friday afternoon. Dr. Okafor called me herself. The mass was a borderline ovarian tumor, not fully malignant, but not benign either. It required surgical removal, and the surrounding tissue needed to be examined for any signs of spread. If this had been caught in March, she said carefully, the surgery would have been simpler. The mass was likely half this size. I didn't say anything for a long time. She waited. "Thank you for telling me the truth," I said finally. "That's the minimum you deserve." The surgery was scheduled for the following Wednesday. I called my brother Derek the night before. He picked up on the first ring. "I need you to know something," I said. "I have a tumor on my ovary. I'm having surgery tomorrow." Silence. Then. "What? Since when?" "Since March." I told Mom and Dad. They said I was being dramatic. They what? I told him everything. The clinic visit. The canceled ultrasound. The garden party. The ER. The months of dismissal. He listened without interrupting, and when I finished, the silence that followed was different from my parents' silence. His was full. Theirs had always been empty. "I'm coming," he said. "Where are you?" He drove 3 hours from Columbia and slept in the hospital waiting room the morning of my surgery. When I woke up in recovery, groggy and sore with an IV in my arm and a drain in my side, he was the first face I saw. "It's out," he said. The doctor said they got clean margins. I closed my eyes. The tears came then, quiet, slow. Not because I was scared, but because someone had finally shown up. The pathology report confirmed what Dr. Okafor had suspected. Borderline serous tumor, stage 1A, fully contained. No spread to the lymph nodes, no evidence of metastasis. The surgeon told me I was lucky, not because the tumor was harmless, but because it hadn't been given enough time to become something worse, though 11 months was already too long. Recovery took 6 weeks. I moved slowly, deliberately, learning to trust my body again. Derek came down on weekends, bringing groceries and terrible movies, and the particular gift of someone who simply sits with you without needing to fix anything. Deb sent flowers from the restaurant staff with a card that read, "Hurry back, the oysters miss you." My parents didn't call. Not after the surgery. Not during recovery. Not once. 3 weeks into recovery, while I was sitting on my apartment balcony with the notebook open in my lap, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Hi, Renee. This is your mother's friend Gloria from church. I just want you to know, your mother has been telling the women's group that you had elective surgery for a cosmetic issue and that you're recovering at a spa in Savannah." I read the message twice, then a third time. The rage didn't come hot. It came cold, focused, clarifying. She wasn't just ignoring my illness. She was rewriting it. I didn't respond to Gloria. Instead, I opened my laptop and started a new document. At the top, I typed, "Timeline." Below it, I built a chronology. Every date I'd mentioned, the mass to my parents, every dismissal, every specific phrase. I cross-referenced it with the notebook, with text messages I'd saved, with the screenshot of the canceled ultrasound authorization. I included the pathology report, the surgeon's note about delayed diagnosis, and Dr. Okafor's written statement that earlier intervention would have resulted in a significantly less invasive procedure. I emailed the entire file to a medical malpractice attorney named Joan Hartley, whose name I'd found through a patient advocacy group online. She called me the next morning. "This isn't malpractice," she said. "This is something else entirely. Your parents deliberately interfered with your access to care. You may have grounds for a civil claim medical neglect by a third party and insurance fraud." Insurance fraud? Canceling a medically authorized procedure by misrepresenting yourself as the patient, that's not a gray area. I sat with that for a week, not because I doubted the facts, but because I needed to understand what I was choosing. I wasn't choosing revenge. I was choosing a record. I was choosing to name what happened so that it couldn't be edited into a spa trip or repackaged as a parenting philosophy. In August, I filed the claim. I didn't tell my parents. I didn't warn them. I simply submitted the documentation Joan had helped me compile and let the process begin. The response came fast. My father called Derek first, not me, never me, and told him to talk some sense into your sister. Derek told him to talk to a lawyer. My mother sent a letter handwritten on her monogram stationery that read, "Families handle things privately. What you're doing is a betrayal of everything we raised you to be." I read it once, folded it, and placed it in the file. Evidence. The mediation happened in October. I sat across a conference table from my parents for the first time since the ER. My mother wore her church face, composed, dignified, wounded. My father sat with his arms crossed, exuding the particular confidence of a man who has never been held accountable for anything. Their attorney argued that they had acted out of concern, that they believed my symptoms were psychosomatic, that they were protecting me from unnecessary medical intervention. Joan placed the ultrasound cancellation record on the table. Then the text messages. Then Dr. Okafor's statement. Then the pathology report, with the surgeon's note about the consequences of delay. The tumor was real, Joan said. The symptoms were real. The only thing that wasn't real was the story her parents told to avoid dealing with it. The room went quiet. My mother looked at me for the first time in months. I expected anger or defiance, or that familiar cold dismissal. Instead, I saw something I'd never seen on her face before. Fear. Not fear for me. Fear of what the record now showed about her. The case settled in November. The terms included reimbursement for my medical expenses, coverage for ongoing monitoring, and a formal acknowledgement, not an apology, but a written acknowledgement that the cancellation of my ultrasound authorization was done without my knowledge or consent. I didn't celebrate. There was nothing to celebrate. My left ovary was gone. 11 months of my life had been consumed by a battle that should never have happened. And the people who were supposed to love me most had chosen image over intervention, silence over survival. But I was alive. The tumor was out. The margins were clean. And the notebook, that dollar store composition book with the cardboard cover and the faded blue lines, sat on my nightstand like a testament to the fact that when no one else would listen, I'd listen to myself. In January, 7 months after the surgery, I did something I hadn't planned. A woman at the restaurant, a regular, mid-50s, always ordered the shrimp, and Grit stopped me as I cleared her table. "Honey, I don't mean to pry, but are you okay? You've lost weight and you seem different." Something about the way she asked, not cautious, not performative, just plainly human, unlocked a door I'd been keeping shut. I sat down across from her and told her the short version. The lump, the parents, the cancellation, the collapse, the surgery. She listened with her hands folded around her water glass. When I finished, she said, "My daughter went through something similar. Not the same diagnosis, but the same family. The same silence. She didn't have anyone to tell her she wasn't crazy. Neither did I. Not for a long time. Would you ever share your story? Publicly? I hadn't considered it. But that night, I sat down and wrote a long post online. No names, no locations, just the bones of what happened. How I found a mass and was told it was anxiety. How my own mother canceled my ultrasound. How I collapsed at work and still had to fight for a scan. How the tumor turned out to be real, and the silence turned out to be the most dangerous symptom of all. Within a week, the post had been shared thousands of times. People wrote to me from everywhere, young women whose parents had dismissed their pain, men whose families had called them weak for seeking help, Nurses who said they'd seen this pattern and felt powerless to intervene. A journalist from a health publication reached out asking for an interview. I said yes. The article ran in February. It didn't name my parents, but it named the pattern. Familial medical gatekeeping, when family members actively prevent someone from accessing healthcare, not out of ignorance, but out of control. My mother sent one final message after the article went live. 5 words. "You've destroyed this family." I didn't respond. Because she was wrong. The family was never whole to begin with. I just stopped pretending the cracks were decorative. Today, I volunteer with a patient advocacy group that helps young adults navigate the healthcare system when their families won't. I sit with people in waiting rooms. I help them understand their insurance. I tell them, over and over, the thing no one told me: you do not need permission to take your own body seriously. The scar on my abdomen is 4 inches long. It fades a little more each month, but I don't mind it. It's proof not of what they did, but of what I survived in spite of it. I don't wait for anyone's permission anymore. Not to speak, not to hurt, not to heal. And if this story sounds like yours, I need you to hear something that I wish someone had said to me in that bathroom in March, when I first pressed my fingers against something that didn't belong there and felt the world hold its breath. You're not imagining it. You're not being dramatic. And the people who tell you otherwise, even the ones who love you, are not the authority on your pain. You are. If this story resonated with you, share your experience in the comments. I'd love to hear how you found your voice. And if you haven't found it yet, start here. Start now. Subscribe for more real-life stories that reveal the quiet battles behind closed doors. Your story might be the one someone else needs to hear.